Hello, and welcome to the Thinking Elixir podcast, where we cover the news of the community and learn from each other. My name is Mark Erickson.
And I'm David Bernheisel.
Let's jump into the news. First up, Phoenix 1.8 will ship with an agents markdown file when generating new apps. So we've got a link to where Jose William talks about this, and we've got links to the PR that adds this so you can see what some of this code looks like. But this new agents markdown file helps teams that are using AI-generated tools like Cursor or Claude Code or something. It'll help them have better experiences generating Elixir and Phoenix applications out of the box. The code was actually extracted from Chris McCord's Phoenix.new project. He talked about some of this when we talked with him about how Phoenix New is working and what he had to do to make it work well with Phoenix and Elixir. Some of the stuff was telling the LLM, don't ever try to index directly into a list. Don't do it this way instead, things like that. But in that thread on X, Jose was asked, when can we expect Phoenix 1.8? And he responded, I think we're all good for Phoenix 1.8. I'd say next week. And LiveView 1.1 and Phoenix 1.8 should be out. So that was July 25th when he said that. So that probably means it's going to be released tomorrow after we've recorded, or maybe even later today.
With 15 minutes after we end.
Yes. So we can expect Phoenix 1.8 and LiveView 1.1, which is super awesome. So as soon as those are released, we will be certain to take a look at those and be sharing all the cool stuff that we can find.
I'm pretty excited about that agents markdown. Speaking of the agent stuff, so Phoenix 1.8 will ship with it, but you still kind of need to tell your agent to go find it.
Yep.
And so you might check out the package is called usage rules. And so usage rules will be able to go traverse all of your dependencies, including Phoenix, and then link them together into a nice spot on your repo that your agent will likely come and find. Claude Code and Gemini especially, I think, will be able to find it.
Today's episode is sponsored by Paraxial.io. Every day, hackers search the internet for vulnerable applications, aiming to steal sensitive data, commit fraud, and spitefully ruin the weekend of a hardworking developer. Paraxial.io is the first and only security platform with full Elixir support that stops these attacks. Developers love the Elixir native protection, and management loves the Paraxial metrics that detail the security accomplishments of engineering, which are required for SOC 2, ISO, and HIPAA compliance. Sign up for a free trial of Paraxial.io today and mention Thinking Elixir when you schedule a demo for a special offer. Check it out today at Paraxial.io.
So going back to that agents file for a second, yeah, I misread. So the Phoenix New generator will give you the agents markdown, so you don't have to do anything for your brand new Phoenix app. It should just work. That said, I still do recommend checking out that usage rules library to go find all the dependencies that don't generate stuff into your project.
Well, even still, you might have to tell your coding tool that this file is something it should look at.
Yeah,
I'm super happy to have that because Chris has spent a lot of time doing a lot of generation, with doing Phoenix New, and hit a lot of weird edge cases, I'm sure. So anything to speed things along for new people coming to Phoenix, especially, it's awesome.
Yeah. Hey, so speaking of new people coming into Elixir and Phoenix, on that same vein, Elixir can maybe kind of run, and by maybe kind of, it kind of does, but it's a slightly modified. We'll get into it. So Elixir can run in your browser now, which is kind of crazy to think about. And this project is called Popcorn. Love that little name. I wonder what the history is behind that. And so what Popcorn is doing is it is wrapping something called Atom VM into WebAssembly, and that is what is able to let it run in your browser. Browsers can run WebAssembly. So we've got a couple of links to some announcement posts. This is a project led by Software Mansion. Does a lot of other really cool things. They have a demo site, so you can see it in action. It's popcorn.swmansion.com. So what this can let you do is, well, runs an IEX shell in the browser locally, so you don't have to install anything. always thought about like that being a pretty good like introduction to some folks that have never heard Elixir before and just kind of want to like check things out without going through the whole ritual of downloading and installing stuff. That can often be a big blocker for some folks. Not for Elixir particularly, feel like Elixir is actually pretty easy to install. But hey, if you don't have to install anything, perfect. And so you can check out popcorn.softwaremansion.com to see that in action. So I'm curious though, like what can you do with that, right? Is this only for tutorials or teaching Elixir, for folks? And no, I think that there is going to be more that can leverage this, which is interesting to think about. And so that website that we mentioned, popcorn.softwaremansion.com, has some examples of what you could do with that, right? So the Elixir REPL is one thing, but they have another one called the Game of Life.
Right, yeah.
And so all of that is written in Elixir, but runs in your browser, which is pretty interesting. And so what that implies is that the UI is controlled with Elixir in the browser. No additional JavaScript, as they say there. So I'm gonna start simulation here on my computer. We'll see what what happens here. Yeah, this is pretty crazy. And so I don't know too much more than the concepts of just like what WebAssembly is doing, but I know that there are some APIs from the browser for these languages to like tap into something like the DOM, which is what we're typically used to populate and draw things on the browser that you can see, not just actual like number crunching kind of things on some background thread, but this can actually interact with the DOM, which is pretty interesting. And I'm sure a lot of that is still new and still developing, and not only on the Popcorn and or Atom VM side, but just browser technology in general as well. Anyway, all very interesting things.
Yeah, I was playing with it a little bit, and I was just like, what can this do? So I even tried spawning a new process in this IEX shell running locally in my browser, and it returned a PID. And I did calling the self function, and it returns what PID is currently executing, and I'm able to spawn and create new PIDs, and they were incrementing different PID numbers. And so I was like, wow, you can actually spawn processes. But if I remember right, I think that WebAssembly does not support parallelism. So I don't know exactly what the concurrency model would be. But so when we were looking into this, I looked a little bit more into Atom VM just to understand a little bit more of what's going on there, because Popcorn is built on that. And just to read from that, so we got some links to Atom VM, the GitHub site and the website. And it says, Atom VM is a lightweight implementation of the Beam virtual machine that can execute bytecode instructions compiled from Erlang or Elixir source code. Atom VM supports a limited but functional subset of Beam opcodes, and also includes a small subset of the Erlang OTP standard libraries. So you're getting some useful stuff there, right? Some of the other stuff, it says, Atom VM includes many advanced features, including process spawning, monitoring, message passing, and preemptive scheduling and efficient garbage collection.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, they got a lot in there. So you can still have concurrency without parallelism, which I think is what might be happening here, but I'm not sure. We also have a link in here for a blog post about Popcorn where they talk about some of the limitations. But, when Atom VM, when they're talking about what they intended it to be for, they're listing things like small computing devices and GPIO ports and things like that. So very interesting stuff.
Yeah, I'm very, very curious to see where this is going to go. I don't suppose that they anticipated WebAssembly browser interaction here. Given that it can interface directly with some peripherals, like GPIO ports and all that. I imagine their first direction here was for tiny little machines like that, right?
Yeah.
The ESP32 kind of device. But anywhere that you can make it as small like that as possible. There are surprising other applications for that too. The web browser is another good one. I just wouldn't have thought about it that first.
I just took a look at the Atom VM GitHub project, and it is 45% Erlang and 44% C. So interesting stuff. I think we'd like to learn more about what's going on here. Maybe we'll try and dig into that at another time. And next up, LiveView version 0.6.0 was released. So this is LiveView VUE, named after the Vue.js project. So it has nothing to do with it is not the live view VIEW that we are all accustomed to. So if you're in the JavaScript world, there's React is a big player. It's like the dominant one. Well, Vue.js is another one that's very similar to React. It actually borrows a lot of the underlying technology and approach, but it's a different kind of component model. And there's a project called Live View, VUE, that lets you do Vue on the browser, but it's hooked up directly to a live view on the back end. The idea is trying to get the best of both worlds, where I can have server-side state pushing props down to my Vue components, but my Vue components don't have to have a JSON API or anything like that to be able to communicate with the server. It's quite a bit more direct. So the Live View project describes itself as end-to-end reactivity for Phoenix Live View and Vue, VUE. So with this latest update, instead of sending the entire prop objects, the Live View now sends JSON patch operations to send only the minimal diff. So this works seamlessly with complex nested structures and gets a 90% payload size reduction in many cases. Quite a big improvement. Some of the other benefits or improvements in this latest version 0.6 release, completely rewritten docs. And instead of one huge README, there's now a number of logical retrieval-oriented sections. And they're aiming for a much better experience for onboarding and getting started with this library.
If you're familiar with Vue, there's some common callbacks or common functions that you'd be used to in the rendering lifecycle, of a bunch of Vue components. And so they're adding some more developer experience features like that to make it like VUE, right? So it's not too much out of that world, but working well with Live View. And so they have a couple of extra functions here, like use live navigation, which is programmatic live patch and live redirect. They have another one, use live event, which is simplified server event handling, which is pretty nice. Everyone uses the big link component for navigation, so this will just be, this will just work. And then finally, the $live property value property available is in all the Vue templates, so you can see all the other inner workings there. A nice integration, in other words, right? Purposely built for Vue, purposely built for Live View. So that's pretty nice.
Yeah, and I saw Jacob, the maintainer of this, he explained that since Live View, VUE, integrates Vue.js and Phoenix Live View, it was tricky to test purely through unit tests. You're crossing major boundaries there. And Claude helped him add playwright support and test all of the major points. And really what I wanted to point out with this is an example of what I mean when I say that AI can make testing cheaper. If you're completely a noob to playwright, it's a big lift, perhaps. And you're like, this is a side project. I don't have a ton of time on this. I don't know if I want to spend all my time trying to understand this other framework that can help me test this. But AI can understand that and help you really leverage that to say, now I can test and have more end-to-end testing and have greater confidence that I'm not breaking something, even just as the developer of a library. So that's what I mean when I say AI can really make testing cheaper. It can help you do things that were otherwise too difficult.
So speaking of development experience and making that stuff better, there was an awesome Live View development tip that we came across. I came across this a while ago, actually, probably the first time this fella posted about it, but he's coming back with it. Jacob Skalecki also tweets this tip. He reshared it. In case you didn't know, there's this whole concept of live reloading. Right, so you're on a Live View page, you're making edits to the template, and it can live reload. Okay, live reload is where the whole page can just refresh. There's this other thing that you can do where it's a hot reload. It's kind of its favored cousin maybe, right? Hot reload is where the page doesn't do a full refresh. It just live reloads the page that's there with new patched content on it, right? Think of Live View for live reloading. And speaking of, it has to be, this is about Live View. So we've got links to the specifics here. The original gist that Chris McCord had shared a long time ago. That packages it all up. It's just a couple lines, not a big deal. And so what this is about is that Live View and Phoenix... Yeah, just Phoenix. It comes with a configuration watch certain files, and when those files change, to live reload, right? So everyone that does the Phoenix new project, they get this config in their dev config. They'll see a live reload key in there. And then they'll see patterns in that, and patterns are these regex patterns of all of your EX and HEEX files, and when it sees one of those things change, it will live reload. There's another key that goes alongside of that called notify. So you notify, it's a live view notification, and you watch some of the same files. Actually, it's pretty much the same file. So it's any live view in there. And what that will do slightly differently is that it will just simply notify those live view processes that something changed on those files and to do a patch of the new content. And so, yeah, the experience is just better, in other words, right? Here's the scenario, right? You got a form on the page, you're typing stuff up, you got your situation the way you need it for your thing to be rendered the way it needs to be rendered. And then you make a template edit, and then you don't see it because you have to refresh the whole page, right? What this solves is that you don't have to do the full page refresh. It will just refresh a hot reload style, and you get all of your things still intact there. And it's pretty good. Anyway, wanted to pass on that tip. Mark, what did you try it out?
Yes, I have to say, if you haven't changed this, you really need to, just like you, dear listener, so I do a lot of development on AI applications, and this was really an incredible improvement. So I tested it by starting an AI chat. So it's open TCP connection to an LLM service, and the data is being live streamed back. The live view is holding all this state, and it's outputting it to the screen. And while that's going, I switch over to my code, make a code change in the template, switch back, and the template updates, and the stuff is still streaming, and I haven't lost any state. And when I did this before, it would, as soon as it detects the change, it would reload the page. So as soon as I modify the template, I would kill the process and basically restart a new live view process or something. It would just cause it to like completely lose its state.
Yeah,
much improved, much appreciation for that. So yeah, I would argue that this probably should be the default, right?
Yeah. I double checked on the latest RC Phoenix New, and they don't generate this for new projects. So I'm kind of curious why they don't make that the default. There might be a reason. I'm not sure. I've tried it on several projects and it just works. Yeah. So I don't know why not. It could be one of those things. It's just like, oh yeah, we added this feature, forgot to put it in the generators. Maybe I'll pop open an issue at GitHub. We'll see what happens.
The actual gist that Chris McCord shared from this was back in May 2024. So over a year ago, but I had missed it back then. And so I suspect there's a number of people out there who still don't know about this. So I want to make sure we're able to kind of let you know, if you're working with LiveView a lot, this would be a big benefit. Now, if you're doing like a JSON or GraphQL API backend and someone else is doing the front end, it doesn't apply, right? This is if you're doing live view. But if you are, you want this. And next up, MDEX, which is Markdown EX, version 0.8 was released. So we've talked about this a little bit recently. It's because I had somewhat recently discovered it and had a lot of fun with it. The latest version adds decorator support. So maybe when you're doing code in Markdown, like where you're doing the triple backtick and Elixir, and then you follow up by some Elixir code. When it renders it, it will render it really nice and, getting code highlighting and everything. Well, what you can do with this new decorators is on that same line with the triple backtick Elixir, you can have a space, and now you have other decorators where you can do things like overriding the theme that it uses for rendering that Markdown. Or you can say, I want to highlight these 3 lines, which if you're doing something as a demonstration, maybe a blog post or something like that, it's really nice to be able to highlight the lines. Or you can add custom classes that end up getting rendered out into the final result. And there's a number of others. So we've got a link to the documentation where it has a list of all these supported code block decorators. But anyway, I just thought that was really neat.
All right, next up, there's an update to a library that might not be on your radar. So maybe this will put it on your radar. It's called Hologram. They updated to version 0.5. It's definitely a component library, but it's not a typical component library, like in the sense of like Daisy UI or Mishka Shalokum or something like that. Instead, this feels a little bit more like a framework, like LiveView. The differentiating feature here of hologram is that it is isometric. What does that mean? Well, that means you're going to write Elixir, and there are parts of that Elixir code that is going to be transpiled, converted. I don't know what the right word is there. Converted to JavaScript to run in the browser. Right, so a lot of us are used to like Phoenix LiveView. All of that is server-side rendered code, and there is Phoenix LiveView JS that handles a lot of the stuff. We don't typically interact with the JS parts. In our server-side code, we tell the JavaScript what to do. We have JS commands, that kind of thing. But for the most part, we don't manually really track our state on the browser side, right? LiveView abstracts that away, patches it very efficiently, uses WebSockets, all that kind of stuff. Hologram is taking another approach that further extends into the browser. It converts your Elixir, some of your Elixir, into JavaScript and lets you write component code, but some of that is going to run in JavaScript, which is pretty interesting. Okay, so let me pause on that. So the 0.5 release, what's included in it? Well, probably the biggest item on there is that it's got a major performance leap. So milliseconds to microsecond kind of execution times. It's 50 times faster than what it used to be. They now include session and cookie management, live reload, incremental compilation, typical developer experience stuff that we're used to, but then also new pointer and mouse events. Phoenix LiveView also supports some of that. And the demo shows off the performance improvements by having an interactive SVG generator by using those browser clicks and drags and all that kind of stuff. So a whiteboardy kind of, experience a little bit, which is pretty nice. I don't know if it's ready to, use in a production app. I do think that this is going to be a pretty interesting, direction if this proves out to be really good. The isometric part is the really interesting part here again, right? They've got a whole page that talks about what hologram does and what makes it, different. So we're definitely not going to mention everything here. You should definitely go check that out. But that isometric part and having some of it run in the browser might solve some of those issues that typical front-end oriented, developers might have with what they view as old school or server-side rendered kind of stuff, centralized, one server kind of, that's not always one server, but that's what they'll believe, right? One server out there in the world is getting all these requests and nothing happens well on the front end because it's all one server. That's malarkey, first of all. But second of all, hologram just takes another approach that might solve that for those folks that have those critiques of LiveView. We'll see how this ends up, right? I think that's a really cool. I don't want to call it an experiment because I'm sure this is much more than that for the contributors of hologram. But for me to deal with that, I think that would be an experiment for me to see how this goes. So it'd be an experiment for anyone else, I think, that wanted to try it out to see what this was like. What would it be? What would it be like to have some of your Elixir code be converted into JavaScript? I'm really curious how that works.
And last up for the news, ElixirConf US 2025 is coming up. And we just wanted to make sure that you are aware that you can get your tickets using the Thinking Elixir discount code to get 10% off the ticket price. And we've got a link to where you can just go and have that automatically applied to the checkout price. And just as a reminder, it is in Orlando, Florida, and the conference dates are Thursday, August 28th, and Friday, the 29th. And then training is prior to that. So you can go check all that out and see what talks you're interested in. It looks like it's a 3-track conference. So you're going to have 3 rooms going simultaneously, which can make it a little difficult to always be able to choose which one am I going to go to? I want to see all of this. So you can help prioritize that, and then you will have access to the recordings as well. And that's it for the news. So while we're here, we were talking recently in some of this news and just in general about how AI is really impacting some of, like how Phoenix 1.8 is getting agents, a markdown file that has instructions for the LLM, and how usage rules is a new project to help you get all of the agent instructions out of these different mix packages and made available to your coding tools that are using AI assistance. I was noticing this online, and I've been seeing some of this personally. I just want to get your take on some of this too, David. But it seems like if we're able to generate code a lot faster, just generate more code more quickly, that seems to be shifting and putting pressure in new places in the development pipeline. Particularly what I've seen is it's impacting PR reviews, right? Because there's a lot more to review. There's a lot more code. And like, because I use it to also generate tests to get good test coverage. And so it's generating a lot of test code, which needs to be reviewed. You know, I need, as a responsible developer, I need to review that code, but that's part of the PR too. And then there's the QA aspect of, does this actually do what we want it to do? You know, it's like, yes, I've generated a whole bunch of code and all the tests pass. It does something, but does it do what the business needs it to do? Someone still has to verify that.
Yeah. I definitely have felt this for sure. You know, there's been a time or two where I've written some code. I finally got something to work, and then I'm just kind of tired at this point. Like I ran that little marathon. I'm like, okay, but I can't just commit this with no tests. So I was like, all right, Claude Code, let me see what you got. And I tell Claude Code, hey, write me some tests for this. And it does a fair job at it. But well, it's obviously not what I would have written, but it would pass the smell test, right? And so let me see if I can sneak that by my other developers, you know, reviewing, and see if they mention anything about the quality of these tests. And yeah, like merged, it's fine, whatever. And then I came back to that thing and I had to adjust something and then modify the test. And so now I actually had to go through this AI generated like test cases myself and understand, what is this actually doing? It was so unhelpful, you know, the way that it wrote it. I was like, okay, I'm deleting this whole describe block here. This is not really doing anything. And I had to rewrite it, and I rewrote it in a way that was a little bit more integrative as well. Perhaps I'm not a fantastic TDD practitioner here. I'm maybe more behavioral driven, where I just want it to behave this way. As long as it behaves this way, I don't really care what happens, you know, in the details of it. But in that process, you know, if I were to measure that whole man hours for me, I would have to guess that it actually took me a tiny bit longer to actually have AI write the test for me, and then me at some point later revisit that, make sense of that, try to make it work in its current little, you know, world, and realize that this is dumb, delete the whole thing, and then rewrite, you know, a portion of the test there. And that was like a very isolated scenario. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there's a wider conversation about like QA testing in general, because, you know, the way you set this up is like, yeah, if we just have more code flowing out there into the world, we need more checks and balances to make sure that we don't screw things up when it's out there. And not only that, okay, it's out there, but now I have to change things, which is almost harder, you know, than the new thing. And so when you got to change things and then assert that the tests are keeping up with it and still make sense, and or even more difficult, assert backwards compatibility, now we're in this quagmire of a world of like, I've got 3 times as much code testing this thing than I do that actually implements this thing, and things turn out to end up slowing down, I think. Now, I know there's another article out there of some metrics and about how AI, you know, coding assistants have actually like sped things up or slowed things down. And this bombshell of an article basically said that everyone thought they would be 20% faster. Turns out they're 20% slower.
But they felt they were faster.
They felt they were yeah. And I certainly, it's all anecdotal. I can't measure any of this, you know, in hindsight, but I can agree with that in my personal experience. It's like, okay, at some points I was definitely faster, but it definitely slowed me down other places.
Maybe you've shifted where the time you end up spending the time. Yeah. So one of the tweets I saw, this kind of started off a conversation that I saw online, and we got a link to these tweets that we're going to be mentioning. I'm just pulling out a portion of his message, but he says, QA is about to become a huge bottleneck in software development. AI lets us churn out huge amounts of code extremely fast, but you still need to make sure it works. AI can help with testing too, but if you really want to be sure it works, you need the reassurance of human eyes on it, and human eyes don't scale. And Mike Hostetler, he's in the Elixir community too. He says, this has already hit our team. He was responding to this previous tweet. Even with automated PR review tools, we struggle to code review, QA, and accept code changes fast enough. We are discussing bringing back full-time paid QA to help accelerate this, something I haven't seen in over a decade. It's true. It's been over a decade where I worked at a company where we had dedicated QA team members who were helping to validate and pass off on code changes. I haven't seen that in a long time.
My previous workplace had dedicated QA folks, and yeah, they were very, very valuable for those big kind of features that like could touch a lot of things. Like whenever you got code reviewed and you asserted like your specific things, and maybe you did your click testing or something. Not that everything had click testing, but there were certain features before they would do marketing blasts, for example, that hey, this new big thing's out, go try it out. They would have a QA team go through and actually assert that things are working as expected. And the classic meme of like the developer planned for this field to be an integer, and so they test for negative integers, 0, and positive integers, but then QA comes around and then throws in the whole script of the B movie in there, and completely crashes everything, right? So they definitely have like what users are actually going to do in mind. They're more customer experts than developers are.
Yeah, it's crazy. I had personally, I really valued having a QA team member because like this was at a company years ago, right? And where in some ways I hated it because we were being judged. The developers were being personally judged on terms of how quickly they could get features committed and PR reviewed and merged in.
Yeah.
Right. So it was feature velocity or bug fix velocity. And then QA, it was a separate review, separate person. So it was a very, very, I have to finish my work. It's blocking. Now they start their work, but I've got to go do something. So I'm going to go on to the next task, but none of it's finished until it gets fully reviewed. And then they find I didn't account for some certain circumstance, or I didn't know about this other thing. And so it keeps coming back. So I hated it in that way because it's very interrupting, but they were finding stuff I was not thinking about, like you were talking about, like the whole B movie script, that's great. It's like, I never would have thought to try something that's huge and crazy like that.
The automated PR review tools is like another aspect of this. So say that we didn't hire, a human pair of eyes, right? And another brain to like bounce this off of. And so you want to automate that with more AI.
Right.
So Claude Code has a good GitHub action out there. It'll review a PR and all that kind of stuff. And even without that, a lot of developers would even come up with PR descriptions with AI generated stuff. So like, give me a PR description of what I've done here.
Yeah.
And it's so verbose that it kind of swings the other way. It's like, okay, you did help me generate some wall of text here to post on the PR review or the PR description. But now I still need other people to read this stuff to really verify that what this is doing is correct. And so at some point you get into this pattern of just like, well, that's Claude's opinion, man. And I'm just gonna scroll past that giant wall of text. I have no idea what's going. I don't care enough for it to. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then Jose Valim weighed in on this conversation too, and he says, the field of software verification, meaning tests, code reviews, QA, type systems, formal verifications, etc., will require new development and practices over the coming years, and folks have not been paying enough attention to it, except for all we've really been paying attention to is the code review part. And he says, P.S., having AI write and run tests does not necessarily help if the agent is not capable of determining what is expected behavior. And that's really what it comes down to. So for me, like, I've found a lot of value in having a really well-written, like, product manager says, this is what it's currently doing. This is the acceptance criteria. When that is really well defined, and if I don't have a project manager doing, then I'm the one responsible for doing that. And that's where I say, this is what's expected and what the difference, and and when that is really well defined, then AI can do a much better job, in my experience, of generating code that actually does the thing the business needs.
Yeah. So there's a new feature out in Claude Code. I haven't tried it out yet. I need to go give it a shot. Sub agents. I don't know why they call them sub agents, but just
I know.
agents.
I've seen it. It's all over socials. Yes.
Oh yeah. It's. So, if the dear listener hasn't heard of this yet, the idea here is that Claude Code is an NPM program, terminal-based CLI of you talking with this agent, and it's optimized for code generation and stuff. And and it's basically one agent. But now you can configure it to have multiple agents, so you can set up these kinds of personalities, right? So the idea here is that you could instruct one to be your product person, instruct another one to be your test person, instruct another one to be your playwright expert, that kind of thing. And then your overall plan would be to go through, each of these kind of bullet points that would highlight the strengths of each of these sub agents. And so you've written your code maybe, or it's helped you write the code, and then it would go to the next step to do like a review of that. Maybe it'll record, playwright end-to-end tests here. It's just another feature to help you with hopefully nail these things better. Because at this present time, if you were just to tell it, hey, I need this feature to do this, and it has no, AI obviously has no eyeballs to know, but if you can give it a pair of eyeballs with a playwright and driving, Chrome and taking screenshots, I think Claude Code, we typically forget that it does recognize, images. It can do object detection at least. And so at least it gets us a little bit closer to it. If it's not perfect, at least it's closer. So I need to give that a shot to see if that helps, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I have this personal project that I built, and I've been creating some videos and demoing it online. I've got a demo that's going to be going out tomorrow from this recording, but it's showing the idea of these sub-agents, right? But mine, I had the idea of a sub-agent that is a task where it does a specific thing with a specific outcome. But then there's other ideas of just I call them modes, but it's a sub-agent. It's just you're switching into a different mode, and that you can have the agent be able to define and switch into these other modes for you, right, as appropriate. But one of the things I've seen, I just want to mention this, is just some of the observations I've had. So I've got this Elixir lang chain library, which I'm probably going to have to come up with a new name soon. Haven't come up with a good name yet. But I don't take PRs. I won't accept them unless it's for things that have new features. I won't accept a new feature unless it comes with documentation and comes with test coverage. Because the worst thing I can imagine is, well, it's not the worst. Something I want to avoid is when there's a new feature there and no one knows how to use it. They don't even know it's there because it's not documented anywhere. So either I have to try and understand what this thing is supposed to do, that this contributor is doing, and understand really well what their use case was. So anyway, I like it when there's documentation. And what I've seen is, and I can tell the difference, right? I can tell when some of these things are AI generated, but darn it, they're good. Like they're writing the test coverage, and I'm reviewing the test coverage. Yes, this is testing what they say they're going to test. And yes, these are good conditions to test for. And the docs are good, because a lot of times, I think this is the case for a lot of our listeners out there, they may not be English as a first language. And writing documentation may be a little scarier, they're not confident in it. But AI can do that really well. They can just describe, this is what I want it to say according to this code change and whatever. And then AI can write it, and it'll be grammatically correct, and it'll be spelled correctly and things like that. So I think there's a big help in that way. But I've seen the quality of the PRs get better just in very recent cases when AI was used. The PR description itself was better written, like explaining under what condition this was a problem and what needed to be fixed. And it was better for me to understand what it is they're trying to do and what condition. Oh yes, I can see how this is now a problem for you, and this use case totally makes sense. I get it. So anyway, I've been seeing it from that perspective too, like as a library maintainer where contributions are coming in where AI was used to help do that. And it's been good. I'm curious,
How can you tell that AI has written something? Like, what are some of the hallmarks? It's not a serious thing, but I'm just curious.
Well, I'll tell you, one big one is if there's a PR description and someone's put a markdown table in it with emojis and checkboxes and X's, a human didn't write that. The number of semicolons. I'm just going to search GitHub right now for "you're absolutely right." See,
right. See how many times that comes up.
This is an interesting time, right? And it is frightening in some ways. And I don't really know where we're all going to end up in terms of careers and jobs, or what work is going to look like. I don't know. But darn it, I want to be able to take advantage of it too.
Yeah.
I'm sure we're going to have lots more to talk about it, lots more to think, and lots more news to cover as things develop. What I'm excited about is seeing that in the Elixir community, we are well positioned in terms of gen servers, processes, agents. I can create really powerful AI systems, just all in live view, right? Like very straightforward, much simpler, much more easy for me to reason about. I'm really optimistic. I still don't know where everything's going to go, but it's going to be exciting. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us next time on Thinking Elixir.